want to end this with a good old overall 2021 wrap up. So we're gonna get a little political here, but I'm gonna try not to shred my credibility and make me an unhireable mess. I'm trying to make sure that does not happen, but I feel like it's good to discuss some of the major events that happened in 2021 as a whole. In fact, this is the bit where I wrote the most notes compared to the other one, so if any of this seems a little half-baked, it's because I probably needed some better notes. But, 2021, how do I describe it? Some people have just said it was another 2020. I don't quite think it was like that, but, the way I would describe 21 is that it was supposed to be the better year of the 2020s. And outside of some things, I think we can safely say that 2021 was not fully better, but it was like marginally better. And as far as this sort of discussion goes, I'm not really interested in like my personal life as far as like, oh, I'm back on like campus. Like I wouldn't say I love being on like the college campus, but it just is what it is. I'm more concerned in this case with the world over. And I feel like 2021 started off with a decent level of promise because of these nice COVID-19 vaccines. But as with everything, I don't know. I wouldn't say like the vaccines necessarily gave us like false hope. I feel like it's a little bit too of an extreme description here to say this like they gave us false hope that things would get better. I don't think that's the case. And it's like, I can't think of, it wasn't like misplaced hope. Maybe like naive hope is like a good way of describing it. I can't think of the best adjective to put before it, but I feel like they gave us some hope that things would get better. They didn't necessarily get better, despite the fact that we have had these for a year. But it just seemed like, thanks to these shots, there would be like some sort of light at the end of the tunnel of, the planet Earth being like kind of similar to how it was before COVID-19 hit in early 2020. But, the problems were multiple. There were people who either were or still are anti-vaccine. And, I don't know. Maybe I don't know if there's just not like a lot of evidence on this or a lot of research on this, but I'm curious what the correlation is between the current, like the COVID-19 specific anti-vax group and the previous anti-vax folks, especially because I don't know. I'm sure there's plenty of overlap, but there seems to be a large contingent who is particularly like anti-vaccine just for the COVID vaccines, which is very interesting. Perhaps strange is a good word for it. But, that was like one obvious damper on like, oh man, this is going to cause things to go on a little bit longer. And then there's the problem with the patent protections on the vaccines too, where, the developing world doesn't have access to the vaccines of the developed world, like the United States, like the United Kingdom, like Europe, for the most part, has had. And that means that now the developing world is going to start getting more variants, which means things are going to keep going and going, which is like not just good. And of course, then that meant we had new variants that would show up, including the one that I assume that what I basically got was the Omicron, not Omicron Percy. Again, I'm going to make that joke again. Not that I got the Omicron variant of the disease. I'm fairly certain, but like, people got Delta. People got, I'm sure there were other letters along the way past the Alpha variant or the original, whatever that one is called, right? But it was just like, that seemed like there's a lot of promise in things getting better, but now it's 2022 and we're still kind of in pandemic mode. It seems like we're starting to think things could get closer to endemic, which would be nice, but we'll have to see what happens in the future here. But it's like COVID-19 seems to be like the veritable newsy gift that keeps on giving. And I suppose I would be remiss in not talking about 2021's January 6th incident. I'm not sure what word I specifically want to call it, because depending on who you talk to when you talk about January 6th of 2021, some are going to react to what you call like what happened at the U.S. Capitol over a year ago at this point. Either like they're going to react to it negatively, basically, no matter what you call it, because either they think, because the proper word for it, whatever you want to use for it, either they'll think you're downplaying the severity of it, or you're overselling how bad the incident was in their eyes. So I don't know. I'm going to call it the incident, because I feel like incident is a fairly neutral term for it. And you can have a positive incident, you can have a negative incident. But, at the very least, I think it's fair to call what happened there an attack. At this particular moment, I don't feel like I'm the most qualified person to comment on it, as much as I follow these sorts of stories. But it's just a supercharged subject matter. But I think it's undeniable that the fact that you could have armed people entering the Capitol in an aggressive fashion does not seem to bode well for the health of the U.S. Republic. It suggests that there could be some bad things happening. But I don't want to talk about all bad things. I want to talk about some things that I would generally consider good. Of course, I've mentioned that I tend to find myself leaning a little bit more left. So some of these things I would find myself a little bit more positive on than others. But I can understand where people would have negative reactions to some of these things. Like something that I generally feel negative about, but I mean, still could have some positive stuff, are what I would call pretty ridiculous private space affairs, like Jeff Bezos's famous rocket ship, you could call it. It's not shaped very appropriately. And then you have like SpaceX and like, what is it, Virgin Space, or is it, I can't think of what it's called. There's the Virgin. The point is that's the company that does this. But you just like in 2021 just seemed to be the year of billionaires and people with massive amounts of money deciding we are going to go into space. And I just find that very interesting that 2021 is the year that they chose to do that it all happened at around the same time. And I'm just, these are all private space affairs. I have no problem with like NASA doing stuff, like doing things for research. But I don't know what to make of private space travel yet. I think it could end up being an interesting thing. I think it could end up being a good thing. I don't know all about it yet, and especially when you have like Amazon being the ones doing it, or like Jeff Bezos in particular. There's some cause for like some eyebrow raising, I feel like. As far as something that I found very interesting and just followed quite a bit. Again, your feelings on it aside, the Great Resignation, as it's been called, was a huge issue in 2021, and even now continuing into 2022, where it's just like businesses are finding it hard to hire people. And, for workers, that seems to be a pretty good thing for them, and that it's like trying to like sort of like be like an overall sort of negotiation with employers and trying to get like higher wages and better working conditions. Of course, there are a ton of strikes going on last year. So, if you're a business owner, obviously I can understand why that might be frustrating. If you're a worker, that tends to be a pretty darn good thing happening across the United States. So it's a very interesting thing to have seen happen. It's just fascinating to see like labor politics maybe starting to come back in the United States. I tend to think that's probably a good thing, but we'll just have to see how the labor issues continue to play out here in the next few years, because I don't know if the U.S. is actually going to have a general strike happen. But I feel like that's something that we're closer to in my lifetime now than I thought we would ever be. And it's just a fascinating sort of thing to follow. Of course, one of the issues that we've talked about a lot is with inflating costs. And, people have tried to make the argument that a lot of that has to come is due to the early stimulus from the president. I am not quite as convinced. It seems like a lot of that is coming from supply chain issues, but, it's just like, man, a box of Cheez-Its. I was gonna buy a box of Cheez-Its tonight. And actually, it's funny because that kind of ties in with the last bit of the Great Resignation and all the strikes happening, because I've made a point of not buying Kellogg's products for a very long while here, including Cheez-Its, because of the Kellogg strike, but now it's over. So I feel like I can be somewhat justified in buying them again. But, it's $3.49 for a 7-ounce box. So, not even half a pound, which granted, who needs a pound of Cheez-Its? But I wanted some of those extra toasty Cheez-Its, but I could not justify to myself paying $3.49 for a box. Maybe if it was a 10-ounce box, that I could see myself paying $3.49 for, but I couldn't do it tonight. But that's just a little tiny example. Of course, the bigger examples, you're talking used cars are just through the roof in price right now. Meat, it's hard to find meat for a good price, especially beef. You look at this really doesn't have to do with inflation, but this is talking about how the supply chain is feeding into inflation. You have the chip shortage making it hard to make new cars, which is hence why used cars are going up so much in price, because people need cars. You just have a sudden shock and big level of demand because people are trying to get back out into society more with their COVID vaccines and the hope, of course, that COVID is closer to being over. So it's just there are all sorts of things happening around here that are causing this to happen, that some suggest things could be good, some suggest things could be not so good, some reasons for it that are generally better reasons, things that are generally not so good reasons, things that can be fixed. And it's just, the hope is that we're going to get to a point where maybe inflation goes down. Of course, today, when I'm recording this, lots talk about a sudden stock market crash and potential are we going to get into a recession or a depression again? I'm not. It's hard to be positive about the future right now. But I digress. Of course, another major event from 2021, the U.S. ending a war. I've only ever known a United States not actively at war for 1 year of my life. So we left Afghanistan, which was huge. Whether you want to look at it as a bungled leave, the way that it was largely portrayed. Of course, if you want to look at it as just great that we left, I'm not, I don't really care how you choose to look at it. I just think it's historically significant for me as someone who, like I said, has only ever known the U.S. not at war literally when I was a baby. And who knows, maybe there were some war things going on in the year 2000 that I'm simply not aware of. I think that's very, very significant to just see something change like that. Of course, now Afghanistan has its own whole set of problems that could mostly be resolved if the U.S. would just give them back their own money. Kind of like Iran, actually, but I digress on that point. But we left a war, and I happen to think that's huge. But really, the biggest overall issue that I found happened in the United States in 2021 is what I have called the overall failure to launch the Biden administration. Your feelings on Joe Biden, one way or another, he was not my primary election vote choice, but I ended up voting for him in the general because I just feel I feel compelled to vote in an election that I have. And of course, it's how could, it's my first presidential election. I feel I have to vote for president. Also, I should point out that in the great state of Wisconsin, the Green Party got kind of screwed on the ballot. So even if I had wanted to like really make sure that I put in a vote for them, it would have had to have been a write-in, which means that you would have to write in their name like perfectly, exactly, to make sure that the person gets the vote. And I was not prepared to risk the spelling any names wrong for president, vice and vice president. So, but that's a slight digression there. But of course, we ended up getting Joe Biden as president, which just really upset the right. And it seemed like, there was just a failure to launch. The only thing that ended up really getting done in 2021, like the only thing that really got passed, was the original stimulus. And then, we talked about infrastructure and Build Back Better, it seemed like, for the whole rest of the year. And it still has passed. Like, the whole thing. I mean, I think, if I recall, the original infrastructure, but not like Build Back Better, the human infrastructure bill, that never passed. But it's just like, oh my goodness. Following all of this, like, stuff was just a mess. It was just like hard to understand everything that's going on and all the internal politics and just this giant complicated bill and just like US politics. It's complicated. It is so complex, but I guess that's the life as it is right now here in the good old US of A. But 2021, again, I think the best way to describe it is it was supposed to be a better year, and it kind of got that way. I wouldn't say it fully got that way, but hopefully, like, here's 2022. Hopefully, being the year that things actually do get better in some way, shape, or form. Hopefully, because the spoilers. This is my final semester of college. I know I'm only 3 years in, but it planned out very well, I guess, to be able to get done in 3 years. Hopefully, I get out of here, I get a job, I move on to greener pastures. That's all I'm hoping for. I'm hoping I can do that. I'm hoping I have time to work on this show that I like making so very, very much throughout the year, whether it's during this semester or during the post-college career start, whatever that's going to hold for me during this year. I just hope things get better. That's all I can say is, whether you're right-leaning, whether you're left-leaning, whether you think I have the wrong opinions on this, I think we can all agree that things should get better. Whether that's, and maybe that's a subjective thing for everyone, but I'm confident that things will improve to one extent or another from this point on. But that's all I really wanted to say today in this like nice hour and 40-minute, nice little 100-minute or so Creative Outlet podcast. Of course, as always, I am your host, Brandon Pudwill. I would recommend, if you can, whether you're on the video show or if you're listening to this via your favorite podcast platform, that you do whatever sorts of engagement-y things you enjoy, whether that's a like, whether you want to leave a comment. I'm still looking for that first ever voice message at anchor.fm/THECOP. If you want to send that in, I'll finally get those queued up here on this here show. But I think I'm ready to close the show out today. Thank you everyone for listening in, and I will hopefully see you again later this semester. Again, just have to play it by ear with how things go. But this is Brandon Pudwill signing out for the Creative Outlet Podcast. Goodbye, everybody.